Have you ever noticed how life seems to unfold according to your deepest expectations? Some people effortlessly attract wealth, love, and success, while others struggle, no matter how hard they try. What if the key to this difference isn't effort or luck, but rather something happening beneath the surface? Neville Goddard, one of the greatest spiritual teachers of the 20th century, taught that reality is simply a mirror reflecting our assumptions. The way you see yourself, the way you expect the world to respond to you, the beliefs you hold, these form the foundation of your life. He often said assumptions, if persisted in, harden into fact. That means what you assume to be true, not what you wish, not what you merely hope for, but what you deeply believe eventually becomes real. Not through magic, but through a process so natural that most people never even recognize it happening. Imagine walking into a room full of strangers. If you assume you are respected, worthy, and interesting, your body language will shift, your posture will be stronger, your voice clearer, your energy magnetic. People will unconsciously pick up on this confidence and respond accordingly. Now imagine walking into the same room assuming you are awkward, unworthy, or invisible. You will carry yourself differently, your shoulders may slump, your tone might weaken, and you may avoid eye contact. The world, acting as a mirror, will reflect this back to you. This is the power of assumption in action. It is not about forcing reality to change, but rather about changing how you show up within reality and allowing the world to respond in kind. Neville's teachings emphasize that your imagination is not just a tool for daydreaming. It is the creative force shaping your life. When you assume something to be true, your mind, body, and external reality start shifting to align with that assumption. He shared countless examples of people transforming their lives through this principle. One of the most famous stories was about a woman struggling financially. Instead of dwelling on her lack, she assumed the feeling of already being wealthy. Every night before falling asleep, she imagined herself in a state of financial abundance, not just picturing money, but feeling the security and joy of already having it. Within weeks, unexpected events unfolded. Debts were erased, opportunities appeared, and her financial life changed. The key was not effort. It was not hustle or struggle. It was assuming the feeling of already being who she wished to become. This is where most people get it wrong. They spend their days wishing for change while still assuming their old identity. They visualize success but feel like a failure inside. They affirm wealth but expect financial struggle. You cannot fake an assumption. Your subconscious mind only accepts what you genuinely feel to be true. So how do you shift your assumptions? It starts with self-awareness. Pay attention to your daily thoughts. Do you assume life is hard, or do you assume ease? Do you assume people will love and respect you, or do you assume rejection? Do you assume money flows effortlessly, or do you assume scarcity? The first step to transformation is noticing your current assumptions, because once you become aware of them, you can begin consciously replacing them with new ones. Right now, think about one area of your life where you want to see change. Instead of wishing for it, assume it's already true. Feel it, accept it, live in that state internally, and watch how life begins to shift in response. Assumption is not about controlling the world around you. It is about changing yourself first and letting the world mirror that transformation back. Everything you experience is a reflection of what you assume. The moment you change your assumptions, you change your life. The subconscious mind is like a soil that does not question the seeds you plant. It simply nurtures them and allows them to grow. Whether you plant seeds of success, love, and abundance, or seeds of fear, doubt, and failure, your subconscious will make them flourish. This is why Neville Goddard insisted that assumption is the key to transformation. The world you experience is simply the fruit of what has been planted within. Most people don't realize they have been planting the same seeds for years, even decades. The way you see yourself, your financial situation, your relationships, your health, these are all rooted in the assumptions you have consistently entertained over time. If you assume deep down that you are always struggling, you will find yourself in situations that reinforce that assumption. If you assume that people take advantage of you, you will continue to attract people who do exactly that. But here's the good news: assumptions can be changed. And when you shift your assumptions, you will notice reality shifting in ways that seem almost miraculous. The key lies in the state akin to sleep, a powerful mental state Neville emphasized for reprogramming the subconscious. This state occurs in the moments before you drift off to sleep, or when you are deeply relaxed, such as during meditation. It is when your mind is most receptive, and the conscious barriers that normally filter your beliefs become weaker. Think about it. How often do you fall asleep worrying about your problems? How often do you replay memories of past failures, disappointments, or fears as you drift into unconsciousness? Neville warned that what you take with you into sleep is what you impress upon the subconscious, and what the subconscious accepts, it manifests. Instead of carrying negative thoughts into sleep, he suggested something radical: Consciously assume the feeling of already having what you desire. If you want wealth, don't just imagine money. Feel the relief, security, and gratitude of already being wealthy. If you seek love, don't just visualize a partner. Assume the deep feeling of already being loved and cherished. If you desire success, don't just hope for it. Assume the quiet confidence of someone who has already achieved it. When you enter this state with feeling, your subconscious mind accepts it as truth, and once it becomes truth within, it must reflect outwardly. Many people struggle with this because they try to force the assumption, but forcing creates resistance. The key is to relax into it, to play with the feeling, to make it natural rather than desperate. Consider a simple test tonight. As you lay in bed, take a deep breath, relax every part of your body, and gently assume the feeling of already having what you desire. Not in the future, but now. Your subconscious does not operate on time. It only responds to now. The feeling of already having it must become more familiar to you than the feeling of lacking it. And as you do this nightly, something will begin to shift. You may wake up with new insights, encounter unexpected opportunities, or simply notice the world responding to you differently. This is not about wishful thinking. It is about programming your subconscious to accept a new reality. Assumption, when done consistently, rewires your mind at a fundamental level. It moves your identity from someone who wants to someone who already is. And when you fully embody this new identity, the external world has no choice but to reflect it back to you. Most people struggle with manifestation not because they lack the ability, but because they lack persistence. They assume a new reality for a day or two, but when they don't see immediate results, they fall back into doubt. This is where Neville Goddard's teachings take a sharp turn from the common understanding of manifestation. It's not about thinking positively for a few minutes. It's about embodying the assumption until it becomes your dominant reality. Persistence is what separates fleeting desires from true transformation. Let's break this down. Every assumption you hold is like a seed planted in the soil of your subconscious. Some seeds take time to sprout. Imagine a farmer planting crops. If he digs up the soil every day to check if the seed is growing, he disrupts the natural process. Yet, this is exactly what most people do with their assumptions. They plant the idea of wealth, of love, of success, but the next morning, they check their bank account, their relationship status, or their circumstances, and when they don't see change, they doubt. And doubt is the equivalent of pulling up the roots. Neville taught that faith is persistence. It is holding the assumption regardless of what the senses tell you. Reality is simply a delayed reflection of past assumptions. If you have assumed poverty, struggle, loneliness for years, why would you expect a single day of assuming wealth or love to completely override that? This is why Neville emphasized the importance of living from the end consistently. You do not react to circumstances. Circumstances react to you. If you want to manifest financial abundance, you must persist in the assumption of being financially abundant, even when bills arrive, even when challenges come. If you want love, you must persist in the assumption of already being loved, even if you are single right now. If you want success, you must persist in the feeling of success, not hoping for it, but knowing it is already done. This is where most people fail. They treat assumption as a test, rather than a way of being. Neville told a powerful story about a woman who wanted to be married. She would persistently assume the feeling of being a wife every night before sleep. She did not entertain thoughts of loneliness or doubt. She remained in the state of being married. Months later, she met a man and got married, in what seemed like an effortless unfolding of events. This is how it works. Not by chasing, not by forcing, but by persistently assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. There is no need to worry about how it will happen. The subconscious mind handles the details. Your only job is to remain faithful to the assumption. And here's a crucial insight. If you do not persist in a new assumption, you will persist in an old one. You are always persisting in something. The question is, are you persisting in your desires, or in your doubts? The world responds to your dominant assumption, not the wishful thought you entertain for a few minutes, but the feeling you return to over and over again. If you can persist regardless of external circumstances, if you can train your mind to hold the assumption even in the face of contradiction, then reality has no choice but to bend. It must. Most people believe their thoughts are random. They let their mind wander unchecked, allowing doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs to run the show. But if you truly understand Neville Goddard's teachings, you will realize something profound. Your inner conversations create your world. What you whisper to yourself in silence, what you assume to be true when no one is watching, shapes the reality that unfolds before you. This is why mental discipline is key to sustaining an assumption. It is not enough to visualize a scene once and expect instant results. Your assumption must become your dominant mental atmosphere. So how do you do this? The first step is awareness. Most people do not even notice the negative mental chatter running through their minds. They assume a desire, yet moments later they contradict it with doubt. I am wealthy, but how will I pay these bills? I am loved, but no one has texted me today. I am successful, but what if I fail again? These contradictions neutralize the assumption. Neville Goddard taught that the moment you become aware of your mental habits, you regain control. Instead of letting the mind spiral into old patterns, you train it to stay in the state of the wish fulfilled. Every time a doubt arises, you gently return to the assumption. Let's say you are manifesting wealth. Instead of letting fear creep in when you check your bank account, you remind yourself, this is just the past reflecting itself. My new assumption is already shaping my future. Instead of reacting with frustration, you reaffirm your new state. I already have what I seek. My wealth is inevitable. It is this discipline, this refusal to entertain contradictory thoughts, that allows an assumption to solidify. And here's the powerful part. Your dominant inner conversations dictate your experiences. Neville often spoke about how our minds are constantly in dialogue. When you think of a person, you are automatically having a conversation with them in your mind. If you see them as distant, they will remain distant. If you imagine them treating you with love and kindness, they will unconsciously be moved to do so. Everything and everyone in your life is responding to your internal narrative. This means that if you desire a specific outcome, you must train your mind to tell only the story you want to experience. The second step is repetition. New mental habits are not formed overnight. The old beliefs may try to creep back in, but your persistence determines the outcome. When you find your mind slipping into old patterns, do not panic. Simply return to the new assumption. This is why daily mental discipline is essential. Each morning, reaffirm your assumption. Throughout the day, watch your inner conversations. Before sleep, live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The mind is like a garden. If you do not actively plant the seeds you want, weeds will grow by default. And here's where most people go wrong. They assume they must feel perfectly confident all the time. This is not true. Even if doubts arise, as long as you do not entertain them, they have no power. You are not being tested. The universe is not delaying your manifestation to see if you are worthy. It is simple. What you persist in feeling becomes your reality. And the more disciplined you are with your inner world, the faster your external world will conform. One of the greatest struggles people face when applying Neville Goddard's teachings is impatience. You visualize, you affirm, you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, but then nothing seems to change. Doubt creeps in. Frustration takes over. This is where most people sabotage their own manifestations. They assume that because they cannot see immediate changes, nothing is happening. But here is a truth that will set you free. Reality shifts the moment you assume. The external world is simply catching up. Think of it like planting a seed. When you place a seed in the soil, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You trust that beneath the surface, something is happening. In the same way, once you assume a new reality, the process has already begun. It is not your job to force it. It is not your job to worry about when or how it will appear. Your only job is to remain faithful to the assumption. Many people get stuck in the feeling of waiting for their manifestation. They constantly check their reality for signs. They measure their progress based on external results. But here's the paradox. Waiting implies you don't have it yet. And as long as you feel like you don't have it, you are reinforcing the old state. Neville taught that the external world is simply a mirror. If you are waiting, you will keep waiting. If you feel lack, you will experience more lack. If you assume it is already yours, it must appear. This is why Neville emphasized living in the end. When you assume something is already true, time becomes irrelevant. You no longer need to check for results, because you already feel the reality within. And the moment you stop needing it, it flows effortlessly into your life. Many people ask, how do I know my manifestation is coming? Neville answered this clearly. Signs follow, they do not precede. This means you do not need signs to believe. Your belief is what brings the signs. For example, someone who truly believes they are wealthy does not need external confirmation. They simply know. And because they know, the external world rearranges to match that belief. A shift in consciousness always comes before a shift in reality. Now, this does not mean you must be emotionless. It means you must let go of needing the manifestation to happen a certain way or within a certain time frame. Detachment does not mean giving up. It means trusting so deeply that you no longer worry about when or how it will come. You simply live in the state of already having it. And when you do this, reality bends in your favor. The people you need will show up. The opportunities will arise. The right circumstances will unfold, often in ways you never expected, because the assumption is already creating ripples in reality, even if you cannot see them yet. Doubt has a way of creeping in, even when you fully understand the power of assumption. You might find yourself questioning everything. What if this doesn't work for me? What if I'm just fooling myself? These thoughts are nothing more than conditioned habits, deeply ingrained through years of external programming. But here's the truth. Doubt is not real. It is a mental reflex, a learned response. And like all habits, it can be unlearned. Most people unconsciously reinforce the wrong assumptions. They say things like, I've always struggled, so I'll probably keep struggling. But the past does not define the future, assumption does. The way you see yourself at the core dictates what you experience. If you assume that life is hard, it will be. If you assume that things work out for you, they must. It is that simple. The key is making new assumptions feel natural. Neville said, it is not what you want that you attract. You attract what you feel natural being. If wealth, love, or success feel unnatural to you, they will always seem just out of reach. The moment you shift your internal state, when being successful feels normal, when being loved feels obvious, your reality catches up. The challenge is resisting the urge to react to the present world. Most people let their external circumstances dictate their beliefs. If they don't see evidence of change, they assume nothing is happening. But Neville taught that the external world is nothing more than old assumptions solidified into form. If you focus only on what you can see, you trap yourself in a loop. This is why persistence is everything. If you assume something and persist in it, the external world has no choice but to conform. The key is holding to the inner vision despite what is happening outside of you. Ignore the absence of results. Ignore the doubts creeping in. Ignore any voice that says you're wasting your time. Because the moment you refuse to be shaken, reality bends. And even when the past feels heavy, even when circumstances seem unchangeable, Neville revealed a hidden tool that allows you to reshape not just your future. The idea that the past is fixed is one of the biggest illusions we accept without question. We are told that what has happened is unchangeable, that the past is a rigid structure we must live with. But Neville Goddard taught something radically different. He said man moves in a world that is nothing more than his imaginal acts pushed out. If this is true, then the past itself is not set in stone. It is simply a memory, a recorded assumption, a projection of consciousness. And anything created by assumption can be reshaped by assumption. This concept, known as revision, is one of Neville's most powerful techniques. He taught that you can go back in your mind, rewrite events, and change how they affect your present and future. This isn't just about rewriting your interpretation. It's about truly altering the cause and effect chain in your life. Imagine a moment in your past that still weighs on you. Maybe it was a rejection, a failure, a painful memory you can't seem to escape. Instead of accepting it as fact, what if you could rewrite it? What if in your imagination you could relive that moment, but this time it went exactly the way you wanted? Neville instructed his students to do just that. To take a memory, go back in imagination, and experience it as they wished it had happened. If they were turned down for a job, they would replay the scene, but this time hearing, "Congratulations, you got the job." If they were mistreated, they would revise the moment into one of kindness and respect. At first this seems like mere visualization, but something deeper happens when you persist in it. Your subconscious does not distinguish between real and imagined experiences. When you revise an event, you change the emotional and energetic imprint it left behind. And since all future experiences stem from your inner state, revising the past literally shifts what you attract going forward. Some who practiced this technique found that people who had wronged them suddenly changed their behavior. Others saw financial losses mysteriously reversed. Some even experienced complete turnarounds in relationships and health conditions, all from rewriting past events in their imagination. But this isn't about tricking yourself into false memories. It's about recognizing that your world is a reflection of inner assumptions. If you assume a past failure still holds power over you, it does. But the moment you change that assumption, reality follows. If the past is flexible, then so is your identity. You are not bound by your past mistakes, not limited by your history. In fact, the self you believe yourself to be is nothing more than an ongoing assumption. And as Neville taught, when you truly grasp this, you unlock the ability to step into an entirely new version of yourself. Most people live trapped by the weight of their own memories, replaying the same stories over and over, unknowingly reinforcing their limitations. But what happens when you stop identifying with the past and start assuming a new version of yourself? Neville taught that your present reality is nothing more than a projection of past assumptions. If you continue to identify with the same version of yourself, someone who struggles, someone who is unlucky, someone who is always overlooked, then life will continue to reflect those beliefs. But the moment you shift your assumption of self, reality must conform. This is why assumption is more powerful than effort. Most people try to force change through action alone, believing that if they just work harder, push more, and struggle enough, they will finally break free. But Neville makes it clear the effort is not what creates results. It is the state of being from which action arises that determines what unfolds. Imagine two people applying for the same job. One believes deep down that they are the perfect candidate, that the opportunity is already theirs, and they act from that assumption. The other believes that success is uncertain, that they are competing with more qualified people, and they act from that assumption. Their actions may look similar on the surface. Both send applications, both prepare for interviews, but their inner state is worlds apart. And because assumption shapes reality, one will naturally attract success while the other reinforces their struggle. This is why Neville insists that consciousness is the only reality. Every outcome in life is determined first by the state you occupy. When you assume you already are the person who has what you desire, your actions, words, and energy align effortlessly. You no longer need to force change, you embody it. But how do you step into a new assumption when years of conditioning tell you otherwise? The key is living from the end. Instead of hoping, wishing, or waiting, you dwell in the feeling of already having what you seek. A simple exercise. Close your eyes and imagine a scene that would naturally happen after your desire is fulfilled. If you wanted financial success, picture yourself casually checking your bank account and seeing abundance. If you wanted love, imagine a conversation where you are already in the relationship. Feel the certainty, the ease, the normalcy of it. The subconscious does not work through force. It responds to repetition, belief, and emotional conviction. When you assume a new state and return to it consistently, reality adjusts, not because you are hoping it will, but because in your mind it already has. This is why those who master assumption appear to have life unfold effortlessly. They do not chase, they attract. They do not struggle, they allow. The shift is subtle yet profound. Instead of looking at life and reacting, they look within and create. And the moment you stop looking for confirmation from the outer world begins confirming you. Most people wait for external validation before they believe in their new reality. They check their bank accounts before feeling wealthy. They look for signs of love before feeling love. They wait for their bodies to change before believing in health. But Neville's teachings make it clear, reality does not create belief. Belief creates reality. This is where most people struggle. They assume a new identity for a few moments, but when they open their eyes and see nothing has changed, they fall back into doubt. The mind, conditioned by years of external influence, tells them, see, nothing is different. This doesn't work. And just like that, they undo their assumption, returning to the same old state they've always known. But this is where persistence comes in. Neville emphasizes that persistence in assumption is the key to manifestation. Your reality will always conform to the state you hold most consistently, not the one you visit occasionally. It's not about briefly imagining success and then worrying all day about failure. It's about dwelling in the new state long enough for it to take root. Think of a seed planted in the ground. The moment you plant it, you don't see results. There's no immediate proof that anything is happening. But beneath the surface, transformation is underway. If you dig it up every day to check for progress, you kill its potential. The same is true for your assumptions. If you constantly check for evidence, you disrupt the process. So how do you persist? You assume and sustain. You live from the end, not as a one-time act, but as a way of being. You become so absorbed in your new state that it no longer feels like a practice. It simply feels like reality. And this is the secret of those who seem to effortlessly manifest their desires. When you adopt the assumption that you already are what you desire, everything shifts. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions naturally align. Instead of seeking proof, you become the proof. Instead of wondering when things will change, you know they already have. And when doubt creeps in, and it will, you remind yourself assumption creates reality, not the other way around. At first this might feel like self-deception, but think about it. Haven't you already been living under an assumption? If you have been struggling, doubting, or feeling stuck, it is because you've unconsciously assumed that struggle is part of your reality. You've already been creating your world through assumption. The only difference now is that you're choosing your assumptions consciously. This is where the real shift happens. The moment you truly get this, you realize you are no longer at the mercy of circumstances. You are the cause, not the effect. And the more you persist in this understanding, the more your world reshapes itself to match your new state. At every moment, whether you realize it or not, you are assuming something about yourself and your world. These assumptions may feel automatic, ingrained by years of experience, but they are still choices. The problem is, most people assume unconsciously. They react to circumstances, believe what they see, and reinforce their current reality without questioning it. But Neville teaches that the moment you become aware of this process, you take back your power. You begin to shape your world deliberately, rather than letting old assumptions dictate your fate. The key is to notice what you are assuming right now. Are you assuming that change is hard, that success takes years, that happiness depends on something outside of you? If so, you are not just predicting your future, you are creating it. Awareness is the first step, but it is not enough on its own. Awareness must be followed by a conscious decision, a new assumption. This is where imagination comes in. Imagination is not just a tool for entertainment. It is the very force that molds reality. Neville calls it the workshop of God, the place where all creation begins. When you close your eyes and vividly imagine a new scene, something incredible happens. Your subconscious does not distinguish between what is imagined and what is real. It only responds to the feeling, the belief behind it. This is why Neville urges us to assume as if it is already done. Not tomorrow, not in the future, but right now. Feel it, embody it, make it real in your inner world first, and the outer world will follow. At first this may feel unnatural. The mind may resist, arguing that reality doesn't match the assumption. But that is the test. Will you trust the assumption, or will you revert to your old beliefs? This is the difference between those who succeed in manifesting their desires, and those who struggle. Those who succeed persist in their assumption, even in the face of contradiction. They do not waver, they do not doubt, they do not let circumstances dictate their inner world. They live as though it is already true. And here is the paradox. The moment you truly assume something is real, you no longer need proof. You no longer search for signs or seek reassurance. You have already received it in your imagination, and that alone is enough. The outer world is only a reflection, a delayed mirror of the inner state. You don't look into a mirror expecting it to change first. You change yourself, and the mirror follows. This is why Neville says, a change of feeling is a change of destiny. It is not just about thinking differently, it is about feeling differently. Your emotions are the signals that tell you what you are truly assuming. If you feel lack, you are assuming lack. If you feel fulfilled, you are assuming abundance. So the real question is, how do you want to feel? If you could feel anything right now, what would it be? Let yourself sink into that feeling. Stay there. And when you open your eyes, carry it with you. Hold it, nurture it, and refuse to let anything shake it. Because as long as you maintain that inner state, the outer world must shift to match it. It is not a matter of if, it is only a matter of when. Most people look at their lives and say, I will believe it when I see it. They wait for evidence, for proof, before they allow themselves to assume a new reality. But Neville teaches the exact opposite. You will see it when you believe it. Belief does not come from proof, it comes from choice. And the moment you choose to believe, the outer world begins to rearrange itself to match that assumption. This is why Neville insists that faith is loyalty to the unseen reality. Faith is not about hoping or wishing. It is not about waiting for signs. It is about walking through life with the certainty that what you desire is already yours. And that certainty is not something you can fake. It must be felt deeply. Consider this. The moment you place an online order, you do not constantly check if it has arrived. You do not worry that it won't come. You assume it is on its way, even though you cannot yet see it. The same principle applies to everything you manifest. The moment you assume it is yours, it begins moving toward you. But if you keep checking, doubting or questioning, you are like someone canceling their order over and over again, preventing it from ever arriving. This is where persistence becomes the key. Neville often emphasized that the true test of faith is whether you can hold on to your assumption without needing immediate confirmation from the world. Most people give up too soon. They assume a new reality, but when they don't see instant change, they return to their old doubts. But the outer world operates on a delay. What you see now is just the residue of past assumptions. If you truly want to change your reality, you must be willing to persist in your new assumption, even when everything around you contradicts it. This is why Neville calls this process a spiritual law. It does not work sometimes. It works all the time. It is as precise as gravity, as reliable as the rising sun. It is only our wavering that delays our results. So how do you develop unshakable faith? The answer lies in the state of being. Faith is not something you practice. It is something you become. When you assume something with absolute certainty, you no longer need to reinforce it with words or thoughts. It becomes second nature. It becomes who you are. Think of someone who truly embodies confidence. They do not have to remind themselves, I am confident. They simply walk, talk, and act in a way that reflects that inner certainty. The same is true for anything you want to manifest. This is why Neville speaks of living in the end. Do not just imagine your desire. Become the version of yourself who already has it. Walk as they would walk. Think as they would think. Speak as they would speak. Because once your inner world aligns with that state, the outer world must follow. And the beauty of this, you do not need anyone's permission. You do not need circumstances to change first. You do not need the approval of others. The moment you choose to assume a new reality, it is already done. The only thing left is time. And how quickly it arrives depends entirely on your ability to remain faithful to that assumption. So if there is something you desire, something you know is meant for you, ask yourself, Am I assuming it fully, or am I still waiting for proof? Because reality is waiting for you. The greatest challenge during the power of assumption is not in imagining what you want, it is in staying faithful to it, when reality seems unchanged. This is where most people struggle. They affirm their desires, visualize their ideal life, and for a moment they feel it as real. But then when they open their eyes and see the same circumstances, the same problems, the same doubts, they begin to waver. They think, maybe this isn't working, maybe I need to try harder, maybe I should look for a sign. But the moment you seek validation from the outside world, you fall into a dangerous trap. You shift from being the creator to being the observer. You stop assuming, and instead you start reacting. Neville reminds us that the external world is just a mirror. It is nothing more than a reflection of your inner state. So when you demand proof before belief, you are like someone standing in front of a mirror, waiting for the reflection to change before they move. It does not work that way. You must move first. You must feel abundant before wealth appears. You must feel love before relationships shift. You must feel successful before success materializes. Because the moment you embody the state of being, the mirror has no choice but to reflect it back to you. This is why Neville places so much emphasis on living in the end. Most people try to manifest from a place of lack. They desire something while simultaneously believing they do not have it. But this contradicts the very foundation of manifestation. You do not become wealthy by constantly affirming, I need more money. You become wealthy by assuming, I already have more than enough. You do not attract love by feeling lonely and hoping for a partner. You attract love by assuming, I am deeply loved and cherished. The state of being is everything, and the more natural your assumption feels, the faster it manifests. But here's the paradox. The stronger your old beliefs are, the more your current reality will test you. If for years you have believed that success is difficult, then even as you assume a new reality, your outer world might momentarily reinforce that old belief. Not because you are failing, but because the subconscious mind is bringing everything to the surface. This is not a sign to give up, it is a sign to persist. Neville calls this the bridge of incidents. Sometimes before a new reality fully unfolds, life will rearrange itself in unexpected ways. You may face challenges. You may experience what seems like setbacks. But these are not obstacles. They are simply the shifting of circumstances, making way for your assumption to become reality. Imagine planting a seed in the ground. For a time nothing seems to happen. If you were impatient, you might dig up the soil, thinking it is not working. But beneath the surface, roots are forming. Growth is taking place. The same is true for your desires. The moment you assume it is done, the roots of change begin to spread. But if you doubt, if you keep uprooting your assumption by checking and worrying, you delay the growth. Faith is the ability to remain still, even when nothing seems to be happening. So as you listen to these words, reflect on your own assumptions. Have you been standing firm in your new reality, or have you been reacting to the world, letting doubt creep back in? Because the truth is simple, the world cannot show you proof until you have first assumed it to be true. You are the cause. The world is the effect, and the moment you truly embody this truth, reality begins to shift in your favor. Every great change in life begins with a shift in identity. It is not just about wanting something different, it is about becoming someone different. Think about the person who wants to be rich but constantly worries about money. They may affirm wealth, visualize success, and repeat affirmations, but deep inside they still see themselves as someone who struggles. The problem is not in the technique, the problem is in the identity. Neville teaches that we do not manifest what we want, we manifest who we are. If you still see yourself as struggling, your world will reflect struggle. If you see yourself as unworthy of love, your world will reflect rejection. If you believe opportunities are scarce, you will always feel like you are fighting for success. The way out is simple. Change who you assume yourself to be. This is why Neville often said, claim it now, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances are right, not when life gives you proof. Claim it now, and make it real in your mind. Ask yourself, who am I in the reality I desire? How do I think? How do I walk? How do I speak? How do I feel? Because the moment you start to embody that version of yourself, the world has no choice but to adjust. But this is where most people hesitate. They think, what if I pretend and nothing happens? What if I feel abundant, but my bank account doesn't change? What if I act successful, but I still face rejection? This hesitation reveals a deeper issue. They are still looking for external confirmation before they believe. Neville was clear. You cannot wait for proof. You must become the proof. You must feel successful before the success arrives. You must feel loved before the relationship manifests. You must feel abundant before money appears. This is not about deception. It is about alignment. When you truly assume a new identity, your thoughts, actions, and emotions change naturally. You begin to see the world through a different lens. And when your perspective shifts, reality shifts with it. Consider someone who sees themselves as unlucky. They assume that no matter what they do, life will work against them. Because of this belief, they hesitate to take risks. They notice failures more than successes. And even when opportunities arise, they do not trust them. Now imagine someone who assumes they are always in the right place at the right time. They expect life to favor them. Because of this, they act with confidence, take more chances, and recognize opportunities that others overlook. Both individuals live in the same world, but their experiences are completely different because of their assumptions. This is why Neville tells us, dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Dare to walk as if it is already done. Dare to move through life as the person you desire to be. The mind will resist. It will remind you of your past. It will try to keep you in familiar patterns. But you must hold your ground, because the moment you step fully into a new assumption, the bridge of events will begin to unfold. Life will shift. Doors will open. Synchronicities will appear. And what once seemed impossible will feel natural. All because you had the courage to assume. When we step into a new assumption, something remarkable happens. Life reorganizes itself around our new identity. At first it may seem subtle, a small shift in perspective, a tiny coincidence, a fleeting moment of unexpected ease. But as we persist, these small moments grow into undeniable evidence. Neville called this the bridge of incidents, a series of events, often unpredictable, that lead us straight to our manifested reality. And yet most people miss it. Why? Because they expect the path to be obvious, direct, and comfortable. But the universe rarely works that way. Instead, the bridge may look like chaos. It may feel like loss. It may even challenge your patience. But what if what appears to be a setback is actually a setup? What if losing that job was the only way to free you for something better? What if that rejection was necessary to redirect you to a path far greater than the one you originally sought? What if the delay was not a denial, but preparation? The problem is, when things don't unfold exactly as we imagine, doubt creeps in. We start thinking, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe I should give up. And in that moment we undo the assumption. Neville was clear. You must persist in the assumption. Persist despite appearances. Persist despite the discomfort. Persist despite the illusion of failure. Because the moment you hold firm, life will find a way to reflect it back to you. Consider the story of a man who wanted a new job. He imagined himself working in his ideal company, feeling the excitement of his new role. But before anything happened, he lost his current job. To the average person, this would look like a disaster, a sign that his manifestation had failed. But this man understood the principle. Instead of panicking, he reaffirmed his assumption. I already have my dream job. Days later, a friend called him about an opportunity, an opening at the exact company he wanted to work for, a company that at the time of his assumption had no available positions. The bridge had been set in motion. But imagine if he had reacted differently. If he had assumed that losing his job was proof that his desire was not working, he may have fallen into despair, given up, and never pursued the opportunity that came next. This is why Neville stressed, signs follow, they do not precede. You must assume first. Reality catches up later. But there's one key thing that makes the difference between success and failure: how you respond when things seem to go wrong. Do you reaffirm your assumption, or do you abandon it? Every moment is a choice. Every reaction shapes the next sequence of events. You don't have to understand how it will unfold. You don't have to force it. You only have to be the person who already has it. Because once you step into that identity, the world will have no choice but to prove you right. The moment you decide to assume a new reality, the world around you begins to shift, not always in ways that are obvious, not always in ways that feel comfortable, but the shift is happening. Most people don't realize it because they are too attached to seeing immediate external confirmation. They watch the clock, they check their bank account, they wait for a message that hasn't yet arrived, and in doing so they contradict their assumption. Neville often repeated a simple truth: you must live as though it is already done. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. The problem is, we've been conditioned to believe that seeing is believing, that if we can't touch it, it doesn't exist. But manifestation works the opposite way. Believing is seeing. You must assume it's real before the evidence appears. It's easy to believe when things are going well, when signs are showing up, when progress is clear. But what about when nothing seems to be happening? What about when everything looks the same? That's the test. That's where most people break. They assume because they don't see movement, nothing is happening. But if you plant a seed in the ground and come back the next morning expecting a full-grown tree, would you assume the seed was broken? No, you'd know it's growing, even if you can't see it. The same is true for your manifestations. It's always working, it's always moving. But it unfolds in a way that requires faith. Neville's student once asked him, "What if I waver? What if I lose faith for a moment?" His answer was clear: simply return. Return to your assumption. Return to the feeling. Return to the truth that it is already yours. Every time you drift into doubt, come back. Every time you let fear take over, realign. Every time the world tempts you to believe in lack, reaffirm your abundance. Because what you assume, you become. There is no need to fight, no need to struggle. Simply step into the state. If you assume you are healthy, the body will align. If you assume you are wealthy, money will flow. If you assume you are loved, love will appear. But the key is consistency. A fleeting assumption does little. A half-hearted belief wavers. A mind that is easily shaken will see reality reflect back its instability. You must decide. Decide that no matter what appears in the external world, your assumption is truth. Because the moment you do, the bridge will unfold. The path will emerge. The world will shift to meet you exactly where you stand. There's a moment in every manifestation journey when the external world will test you. You've planted the seed of assumption. You've felt the reality as though it's already done. And yet nothing seems to change. This is where most people give up. They start questioning, is this really working? Am I doing something wrong? Maybe this isn't meant for me. And in that very moment, they pull the seed from the ground before it has a chance to bloom. Neville called this spiritual perseverance. It's not about forcing things. It's not about chasing results. It's about holding your assumption steady, even when the world tells you otherwise. Think of a river cutting through rock. It doesn't happen all at once. The water flows steadily, persistently, wearing away the surface over time, until one day the rock gives way, revealing a path that was always meant to be there. Your assumption works the same way. You must flow with it, stay with it, keep assuming. The longer you dwell in your chosen state, the more natural it becomes. At first it might feel like you're pretending, like you're playing a role that doesn't quite fit, but that's only because you haven't worn it long enough. A child putting on their parents' oversized coat doesn't yet fit, but given time, they grow into it. Your assumption is the same. You grow into the identity of the person who already has what they desire. If wealth is your goal, how does a wealthy person move through the world? How do they think? How do they feel? How do they carry themselves? If love is your goal, how does a person in a deeply fulfilling relationship wake up each morning? How do they express love? How do they receive it? It's not about faking. It's not about playing pretend. It's about being the version of yourself that already exists in your imagination. This is the shift most people never make. They want the thing, but they refuse to become the person who already has it. You cannot attract wealth while assuming poverty. You cannot attract love while assuming loneliness. You cannot attract success while assuming failure. You must assume it now. And once you do, the external world will catch up, slowly at first, subtly. A chance meeting, a new idea, an unexpected opportunity. The bridge of events will begin to unfold, not because you forced it, not because you begged for it, but because you became it. And once you become, nothing can stop the manifestation from unfolding. Many believe that once they assume their desire as reality, they should see immediate changes in the external world. But that's not how manifestation works. The world operates through a bridge of incidents, a series of events that unfold naturally, leading you to your desire. This is where trust becomes essential, because often these events don't look like progress at first. In fact, they might seem like setbacks. Things might appear to go in the opposite direction, but that's only because the universe is rearranging itself. Imagine you're on a journey through a dense fog. You can't see more than a few feet ahead, but you know the road is taking you where you need to go. Each step reveals a little more. But if you panic and turn around because you don't see your destination immediately, you'll never reach it. The same applies to your manifestations. Neville taught that the bridge of incidents is always unfolding, even when we don't recognize it. Let's say you've assumed yourself to be in a loving relationship. At first nothing happens. Then an old relationship resurfaces. A chance conversation shifts your perspective. You start feeling differently about yourself. Then one day you meet someone unexpectedly. A simple interaction leads to something more. This wasn't random. It was the bridge leading you there. Or perhaps you've assumed wealth. You feel abundant. You see yourself as someone who attracts financial success. Then suddenly you lose your job. At first this seems like a disaster, but in reality, it pushes you toward an opportunity you would have otherwise ignored. An idea, a partnership, an investment. Before you know it, you're in a completely different financial reality. That's the bridge at work. But most people fail here because they resist the process. They assume their desire, but when things don't happen instantly, they fall back into doubt. They react to external circumstances instead of holding their assumption steady. This is the test. Will you trust the process, or will you abandon it the moment reality seems to contradict you? If you truly believe in your assumption, nothing outside of you can shake it. Every event, no matter how random or chaotic, becomes part of the unfolding. This is why Neville emphasized living in the end, not just when things are easy, not just when everything looks promising, but especially when things look uncertain, because in that uncertainty, the bridge is forming. If you stay the course, if you refuse to waver, you will find yourself exactly where you imagined, as if by magic. But it was never magic, it was simply the law unfolding, just as it always does. One of the biggest barriers to manifestation is the need to control how things will happen. The mind wants certainty, it wants a clear path, it wants to predict and control every step. But manifestation doesn't work like that. Neville Goddard taught that the how is not your concern. Your only job is to assume the end result, to fully embody the state of the wish fulfilled. The moment you start worrying about the details, how will this happen? When will it happen? Who will be involved? You shift out of faith and into doubt, and doubt kills assumption. Think about a seed. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every day to check if it's grown. You don't stress over how the roots will form, or when the first sprout will appear. You trust that nature knows what it's doing. Your assumption is the same. It has its own intelligence. It will unfold in the perfect way, at the perfect time. And most of the time, it will happen in ways you could never predict. That's because the conscious mind is limited. It only sees what is directly in front of it. It operates based on past experiences and logical reasoning. But the subconscious, the part of you connected to the unseen forces of creation, sees infinitely more. It arranges events, people, and circumstances in ways you could never plan. Neville often shared stories of people who manifested their desires in completely unexpected ways. A man once assumed he had a high-paying job in a company he admired. He didn't apply. He didn't network. He didn't take any logical action. He simply assumed. Weeks later, someone he met years ago randomly reached out, offering him a position he never even knew existed. The subconscious had been working behind the scenes the entire time. This is why detachment is so important. Not detachment from your desire, but from the process. You must hold the feeling of the wish fulfilled without constantly looking for signs or questioning if it's working. Every time you ask, where is it? You reinforce the idea that you don't have it, and what you believe you manifest. Instead, practice deep trust. Know that the moment you assume something, it is already done. Which incidents will unfold in its own way. Your only path is to stay in the state of being fulfilled. You live as if you already have it. When you truly let go of power, you open yourself to in ways beyond anything your logical mind could imagine. Because the universe is far more intelligent than you could expect. You must not only assume the end, but live from it. This is one of Neville Goddard's most powerful teachings. It's not enough to visualize for a few minutes and then go back to thinking, acting, and feeling like someone who doesn't have what they need. You must step into the state of already having it. This means embodying the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of the person who already has your desired reality. How would you move? How would you speak? What kind of decisions would you make if you were already the person who has it all? Imagine you want financial abundance. If you assume wealth but still feel scarcity. If you stress over money, hesitate to invest in yourself, and constantly worry about bills, then you are not living in the end. You are living in lack. And whatever state you live in will continue to reflect in your reality. The state of wealth feels different. It moves differently. It doesn't chase. It attracts. It doesn't beg. It commands. It doesn't react with fear but with certainty. This is not about reckless spending or pretending. It's about inner alignment. If you truly believe in your wealth, you will no longer operate from desperation. You will make choices that match your new reality even before the physical world catches up. Neville called this thinking from rather than thinking of. Most people think of their desire. They see it as separate or something far away. But when you think from the desire, it is already yours. Your mind and body respond accordingly. Your entire vibration shifts. And when that shift happens, the external world follows. This is why assumption is not just a mental act. It is an identity shift. Your old self, the one that doubts, fears, and hesitates, must die for the new self to emerge. And this happens through a consistent practice of being the person who has already received. This is why Neville's teachings are not just about what you do in a single moment, but about how you live your life. Every interaction, every choice, every emotion, are they aligned with your desired state? Are you acting like someone who already has it, or are you slipping back into your old self? The world is simply reflecting who you are being. So every day, every moment, you must become the version of yourself that has already manifested the life you want. Not tomorrow, not next year, but right now. The assumption of your wish fulfilled must become so natural, so persistent that it solidifies into fact. Neville Goddard spoke often about this. The moment you stop wavering, the moment you stop doubting, your assumption hardens into reality. But here is the challenge. Most people waver. They assume for a moment. They visualize at night. They feel the excitement of already having their desire. And then the next day they look at the world and say, nothing has changed. They get discouraged. They slip back into their old state. And when they do that, they undo the work. Neville said you must persist in the assumption that you already are what you want to be. This means standing firm in your assumption no matter what the outer world shows you. Even if circumstances seem unchanged. Even if nothing appears to be moving. Even if you face rejection, obstacles, or delays. Your job is not to force the world to change. Your job is to persist in the assumption that it already has. This persistence is what hardens the assumption into reality. It is what separates those who succeed from those who give up too soon. Think of planting a seed. If you plant a seed in the soil, you do not dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You water it. You trust the process. You persist in knowing that the seed is doing its work, even when you can't see anything happening. Your assumption is the same. At first it may seem invisible. It may feel like nothing is changing. But if you persist, if you refuse to let go of the feeling that it is already yours, it must come to pass. Because assumption once hardened becomes reality. This is the law. It has no exceptions. The only question is, will you persist long enough to see it through? If you can hold the assumption long enough, the world will have no choice but to bend it. This is why Neville said a change of feeling is a change of destiny. So make the decision today. No more doubting, no more waiting, no more checking the outside world for proof. You are the person who has it. You are the version of yourself who is already living that life. And because you are, soon the world will have no choice but to reflect it back to you. Because you persisted until it